welcome to the channel. Today what we're going to talk about is using robotic process automation to shop for a new barbecue. Let's go. Now, why is this episode important? Well, me shopping for a barbecue isn't all that important, but I thought that there were some lessons that could be shared here in terms of how you can use RPA to detect specific events. And so I think that there's broad applicability to this use case in real world business where you need to go ahead and look for, say, inventory or some sort of event to take place on a web page and then be able to respond. Now, in my specific use case, I'm trying to buy a Traeger, specific type of barbecue, and I want to buy it from Costco. And the problem is that it is out of stock at Costco. So naturally, I want to order this as soon as it becomes available, but there is no subscribe when this product is back in stock. And I also don't want to be manually checking every day because I know what's going to happen is one day I will forget and all of a sudden it'll be back in stock and likely there'll be a lot of other people interested to buy this product as well. So it really got me thinking, why am I doing this every day? I can just go ahead and automate it. Now, the other part of this experiment is also wanting to use unattended workloads. So the ability for this to run in the background. So it wasn't interrupting my day. It didn't, I didn't need to make sure that I had my laptop running when this process was going to execute. So I thought, hey, why don't I take a look at virtual machines and see if I can use Azure Automation to go ahead and to turn on a VM prior to this job running, let the job run, and then we'll let Azure Automation take care of turning that machine off. So I won't go into a ton of details around the unattended and the Azure Automation, but if these are topics that are of interest to you, go ahead, add that to the comments, and if so, I will go ahead and expand upon those specific areas. Now, as I mentioned before, like this specific scenario is likely something you can use in your own business, so I thought it was useful to go ahead and build this out and share those learnings with you. Before we dive deeper into the content, I wanted to let you know about an emerging community found at serverlessnotes.com. This is a community resource that covers best practices, tips, and latest announcements built on contributions by technology enthusiasts from around the globe. On serverlessnotes.com, you'll find content related to Power Automate, Azure Logic Apps, Azure Service Bus, Azure Functions, and much, much more. Serverlessnotes.com is brought to you by Serverless 360, a portal that is focused on operations and support for Microsoft Azure serverless resources. Now, this is a complementary tool to the Azure portal, and it helps organizations in supporting Azure serverless applications. You can find out more about Serverless 360 at serverless360.com. Okay, so here's my specific scenario. Everything is going to run on a schedule. So what's going to happen is there's essentially two schedules here. I'm going to have just one schedule that's part of Azure Automation. Every morning at 9:45, what's going to happen is we are going to go ahead and turn on a VM that runs in Azure. That's represented by this computer right here. As part of this computer, naturally, I have Power Automate Desktop installed. I also have the on-premise data gateway installed and configured there as well. Now, the second schedule I have is essentially my Cloudflow. So this is going to run every day at 10 a.m. And what it's going to go ahead and do is it's going to go ahead and make a call down to Power Automate Desktop. And it's going to instruct Power Automate Desktop to go ahead, launch the Costco website, then check to see if we have an item that is in stock. And I'll show you how I detect that in the demo. And then what's going to happen is we'll return that context back to the Cloudflow, and the Cloudflow will go ahead and send me an email indicating whether or not this particular item is in stock or not. So let's go ahead and we're going to get into a demo. Now we're going to run this demo kind of in two parts. Because I am running this unattended on a regular basis, that doesn't get super interesting because we can't actually see it run. So I will take you through a local debug session where we can see exactly how this Power Automate Desktop flow was configured. And then what I will do is I will run it again in an unattended mode, and you can at least see that unattended does work in this particular scenario. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump into a demo. Okay, so here is the specific barbecue that I'm looking for. This is on the Costco.ca, so the Canadian version of this website. And what we can see here is that there's an image that represents out of stock. And so naturally, this is something I fully expect to change once the item is actually in stock. And so this is one of the cues that I can use as part of my pad script to look for this image. If I find this image, it means that we've got something that's not in stock. It's not available for me to go ahead and to order. Now, conversely, what I've done, and I'm making a bit of an assumption here, but this is the American version of that same web page. This is the exact same grill that's found in the US, and we can see that when it's in stock, this is the image that we do see. And so as part of my pad process, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the existence of this. And if I find this, I'm pretty positive, I'm pretty confident that this is not in stock. But then just to double check, if I cannot find this image, then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and then look for this as essentially part of a fallback strategy. And if I see this image, I'm going to make an assumption that it is good and that it is available for order. Regardless, I'm going to get an email either way. I don't mind getting the daily email indicating that it's not in stock, but that's all right. It's something I can go ahead and live with. Okay, so here I'm in Power Automate Desktop, and so what I have here is that website. I'm going to go ahead and launch the Canadian version of the website. And then what I do have is a second call. This is currently disabled or commented out. And this is what I use to validate the sort of the happy path where it actually is in stock. And so I'll run through this as well just to prove that that works as well. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is I've got an on-block error, and this is partly related when I cannot find that image. I want to basically use exception handling to go ahead and to call a subflow. And that's exactly what's going to happen in this subflow here called available grills. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look for this specific image that I showed you before. So I go ahead and I capture the image. I click on wait for image on the left hand side in my actions. I then go ahead and click on capture image, and I then go ahead and click on capture image, and I can go ahead and find this image on the web page itself. I do want to go ahead and fail with a timeout error if I cannot find it within 10 seconds. That becomes pretty important, as I mentioned, because I've got that on-block error strategy that I'm going to leverage itself. Now, if it is found, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set a variable. This is basically an output variable called is in stock. I will set it to false. And then what I've got going on here, just for debug purposes, is I've got this display message so that we can see the value of this. This is really just for the video. I don't have this in the version that's running unattended. Then what we'll go ahead and do is close the web browser. Now, let's just take a look at this on-block error. So what happens here is I've gone ahead and added a new rule. So I can click on add new rule, and then I can say run subflow. And then what's going to happen is on a specific error, we're going to go ahead and call available grills, and we will continue on with that process itself. And so that's going to go ahead and instantiate this subflow, which is going to check for essentially the opposite. We're going to go ahead and check to see if we've got the in-stock image on the web page itself. And then what will happen is if we do find this image is in stock, we will go ahead and set it to true. And then what we'll go ahead and do is go ahead and just have a display message, once again for just debug purposes. Now what I'm doing here, when I do find it, what will happen is that I'm going to have an output variable that is produced. Here it's going to be x2 and y2. So this just represents the location of the image on the screen itself. And so as long as it's not empty, I know that I've got a value in there, and that as a result, the image was found. And so that's how I'm using that specific strategy. So let's go ahead, let's run this, see it in action, and then we will go ahead and do the opposite, and then we'll also go ahead and take a look at the Cloudflow. So this is the scenario where we've got it out of stock. It's going to be looking for that specific image. This will take a few seconds to run. there we can see that it wasn't found. We weren't able to find a Traeger that was in stock because we did see this out of stock image itself. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just flip this. We're going to disable this one and we're going to enable this specific one. And so this will represent sort of the happy path where it is in stock, and I want to go ahead and I want to be able to run it. So let's go ahead, let's now run this. This will hit the American website. It is in stock in the US. Unfortunately, I can't ship to Canada, but this will represent when this is available in Canada. I should see a positive acknowledgement here and basically know that I can now go ahead and order my Traeger. There we can see that it is in stock because it didn't find the out of stock image. So as a result, the exception handler was run. That exception handler calls a subflow. The subflow is then going to go ahead and check for the specific image. And here we can see that it is in stock. So life looks good from that perspective. So let's just revert this back to get it back to its normal state. And now let's pop over to the Cloudflow to see what's going on. Okay, as I mentioned before, if there's interest in going into this in more details, go ahead and put that in the comments. But what I am doing is I have an automation account set up, an Azure Automation account that is, and what it has is it has some pre-configured solutions that are essentially runbooks that allow me to go ahead and schedule the starting and stopping of VMs, and that's exactly what I've got set up from this perspective. So I can see that my VM is online, and so as a result, it will be safe to run my Cloudflow to go ahead and execute this process. Now, here is my Cloudflow. We can see that it's on a schedule. This will run every day. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and run our desktop flow. Now, this is going to be in unattended. And, so there's not much I need to do differently besides just select this flag. And then what will happen is I will go ahead and run, and then I'll send out an email after basically saying, is the Traeger in stock? And I'm going to get that output variable from the pad flow that we saw. Remember, we saw the message box that said, true or false. That is essentially that value. I've also just got a link here just in case I have any doubts. I can quickly click on the link in the email and it'll go ahead and take me over to the exact web page that I'm interested in. Note, I do have two scopes here to help with exception handling. For some reason, like let's say the VM didn't start and I couldn't actually run this flow, I also want to know about that. And so that's the purpose of these two scopes. I've got my try scope and then I've got my catch scope. So in the event that this previous action fails, skips, or timeouts, I'm going to go ahead and essentially get an error. And I'm going to use this expression that I've talked about on the channel before called result. And I'll pass in the name of my action, sky scope-try, and get the results. So I will know if anything does fail. So let's go ahead, let's run this. I'll essentially pause the recording because this will take roughly a minute to go ahead and run and won't be overly interesting for you. Okay, so it just finished. Here's the email that I have received. Unfortunately, the Traeger is not in stock, so I will have to wait another day for that to take place, but we can see that our process did run successfully, like from a technical perspective, and that I was able to go ahead and send out that email. Now, once again, if you're interested in more unattended, do let me know. I would say one tip that I did run into here is that resolutions make a huge difference. It's something you need to pay particular attention to. Like when I'm running locally on my own laptop here, it's a Surface, so it has like quite high resolution. And by default, when you log into a VM, it's going to go ahead and have like 768 by 1024 resolution, which is going to be vastly different. And so my tip there was I do need to go in and record in that specific resolution for this to be predictable on the VM, especially when we think about unattended. So I'm logging in unattended. I don't see the actual window. When you typically have an RDP session, it will basically snap to the resolution that you're in. And so that was one of the key learnings from that perspective. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot you need to do. And I think this is largely related to the fact that I'm using computer vision and the wait for image action. Naturally, it's going to be using resolution. So if that image is not on the screen, it's not going to be able to be discoverable. And even the size will also introduce some challenges as well. So that would be just one tip I would have just around unattended. In terms of how you obtain unattended, that's something I can go ahead and talk about in more details in an upcoming video if that's of interest. So that concludes another video on the channel itself. Thanks for tuning in. If you're not following me on Twitter, go ahead and find it at Weare. Obviously, you're on YouTube. Go ahead, like and subscribe. If you're into grilling, let me know your secrets. Let me know your favorite recipes. I'd love to hear more about that as well. I'm sort of an up-and-coming sort of barbecue enthusiast, so I'd love to hear how people are using Traegers or other similar smokers to cook their food. So thanks again for tuning into this episode, and we'll see you again shortly. Take care.